My name is Carolyn. I am a childhood trauma survivor and a rape survivor. When I was 7 or 8 years old, there started to be a lot of turbulence in the household between my mom and dad. There was a lot of fighting and screaming and a lot of emotional dysregulation in the house. I also have a younger brother who grew up with schizophrenia. There really wasn't a safe space for my younger brothers and I. A typical day, there was a lot of screaming and fighting. If I had an issue and came to my parents with it and I was upset, they would get upset too. There was just no emotional regulation. When I was probably freshman or sophomore in high school, it was 2 or 3 in the morning, and I woke up to my parents screaming downstairs. As the oldest daughter in the house, I went downstairs to go try and tell them to stop because I went into my brother's rooms and all 3 of them were holding the pillows against their ears and I could tell they were wanting it to stop so bad. I just remember going down there and begging them to stop and having to wait till my mom walked back up to the bedroom. And that was just one instance where I felt I had to be the adult in the house. There were many instances of I wasn't really a child. I was taking on my parents' responsibilities at that time to try to protect my younger brothers. There was a lot of verbal, there was a lot of screaming, there was a lot of tearing me down, especially from my mom. When she would get upset, she would come at me and use things against me that I have told her in confidence, like when I went through my first breakup, when she would get upset at me, she would say, well, no wonder he left you, no wonder you're alone, things like that. So there was definitely a lot of verbal abuse and trying to put me down. I do have a younger brother with schizophrenia, and it was scary growing up with him. He wasn't getting the help that he needed. I think he needed to get a lot more help than he did. He was on medication, but I don't think it was the right kind of medication for him. Growing up with him, there was a lot of screaming. When he would hear voices, he would take it out on us. He would be screaming or angry, or there were a lot of instances where he would run out of the house and we didn't know where he went. So there was a lot of banging doors, and at times there were knives being taken out of drawers when he was angry, and it was just very scary. So I started seeing this guy probably around 2016. We were off and on at the time, and then there came a point where we stopped seeing each other for about a year or so. And then one day I heard from him again, and we went out that night and got some drinks with some friends. And at the end of that night, we went back together and we were hanging out at his house. And the next thing I remember is I woke up and he was doing things that I did not consent to, and I was just very confused and didn't know what was going on. And that was another situation where he gaslit me for a long time and got angry with me and was like, what are you talking about? I didn't do anything, and just got really aggressive with me when I would let him know, this is what I remember, this is what happened, and I would just get yelled at and gaslit by him. I met this person online on an online dating website. There was definitely a little bit of an age gap. I was in my early 20s and I think he was closer to his 30s at the time. We met online, and at that time I still had a lot of things that I didn't heal from my past. He was a really hard worker, and that was something that I really liked, or he came off as someone that was a hard worker. And when we did start talking, he was really kind and really built me up and was almost love bombing me. Looking back now, he was just like over the top and so sweet right at the get-go. A lot of love bombing. And so I fell hard and I fell quick. I was young. And so we started seeing each other, and it was good for a little bit. But looking back, as soon as he saw that I was interested and he had my interest, he started to not be so kind to me. We started to get into a lot of fights via text, and he would say just cruel things to me and put me down a lot of the time. So it was a toxic relationship that we were in, definitely. If you ask me now, I wouldn't chase somebody who was treating me that way, but since I grew up in such a turbulent household and I felt like I had to prove my worth there when it came to relationships, I had a string of relationships where when someone would pull away, I would chase them or try to prove my worth. So that's what I did with him. Somebody who I probably should have taken a step back. There were red flags before the incident happened, but I was just so stuck in wanting love and so stuck in wanting to prove that I'm worthy of love that instead of taking a step back, I would chase. some red flags that came up with him. We would go out to dinner and he was not nice to the wait staff, and that's a red flag to me. He would be disrespectful towards the wait staff, or when he met my friends, he was really disrespectful towards my guy friends. He would get really territorial and just say derogatory things about them. And just the way he would talk to me when he was angry at me, he was not kind. He would be derogatory towards me. And I would see those and feel like, oh, this is kind of a red flag, but then also feel like, oh, we can work through this. I can love him enough to change him. You know, that kind of early 20s puppy love, or just feeling like you can change somebody. I think that's where I was coming from at that time. I remember the instance at the restaurant. I just remember we got our food and I guess something didn't come out the way he exactly wanted to come out, or he thought he ordered it a certain way and it didn't come out the way he wanted it to. And so then he started to make remarks about the waiter and just talking bad about them and about no wonder they're a waiter, things like that. When it came to my friends, when he would meet guy friends, he would get angry at me and think that I was doing things with them, or that they weren't just friends, that they wanted more. Then he would just say disrespectful or mean things about them. If we were out at the bar and some of my guy friends were there, his demeanor would just change. He would get angry, just like angry at me or angry at them, and just make some sly remarks. And I remember that he would be in a good mood, and then if he saw that they were there, he would get really upset and then take it out on me or take it out on how he would treat them. We weren't official, but I remember when we would go out and spend time together, and whenever he needed to talk, I would be there. And I remember a couple situations where things were going on at home and I needed to get out of the house, or I just needed to vent and talk to him, and he would make excuses as to why he couldn't see me and get upset with me. It was just a very transactional on his part relationship. Like when he needed me, I was there, but when I needed him or emotional support, he was never there for that. I don't know why we weren't official. I think he had his own things that he needed to work through. Looking back, I don't think he was emotionally maybe ready for a relationship or trusting enough for a relationship. I just remember it being a situationship. Growing up, I had a father who wasn't emotionally available, and he wasn't there physically either. Most of the time he worked out of the house, and so he really wasn't there. And when I needed him to be there, I remember one instance I told him, I was in probably middle school at this time. I said, Dad, I need you. Like, I need you. And he laughed at me and he said, I'm right here. I don't think he quite understood what I was saying, but what I meant at that time is I need a relationship with you. I need to like feel like you want to have a relationship with me. Growing up, I just didn't have that. I felt like I had to work for it and it just wasn't there. And so I feel like because I didn't have a father who was there for me emotionally and to help me grow up, I was very much more susceptible to relationships that were toxic and unhealthy and ultimately abusive. So we were off and on around 2 years before the incident occurred. Before this, I would go over to his house, we'd watch movies, I'd play with his dog. So I was comfortable going to his house before this incident happened. He was not physically abusive, but most definitely coercive. I remember one time I was at his house and we were watching movies, and then we were getting ready to go to bed, and I just wanted to go to sleep, and he wanted to mess around, and I said no, I didn't want to, and he started begging and pleading and making like sad faces, basically was not taking my no for an answer. I gave in because I felt bad. I think these are a lot of things that were at play when I just wasn't fully healed, and I didn't want him to feel bad. He was not taking my no for a no and was going to push until I changed my mind. I think I played like everything was normal. I think we went to sleep after, but it was just a situation where I didn't want to. I think growing up as a girl in your early 20s, I think we come across those situations. I wouldn't say like super often, but I know that I can count on my hand a few times where I was in situations where I really didn't want to be in, and I didn't want to do things. And sometimes we're just caught in those situations where we feel like we don't have another choice. I wish I knew that I could say no. I wish I knew that I could get out of there and walk out and leave, and that my voice matters. I think I also grew up at a time where women are just supposed to be like, if we're not agreeable or say yes, then something is wrong and we're being mean. At least that's how I felt growing up. I wish me now could be there for me then and just say, hey, like, you don't have to be here. You don't have to be treated this way. You can leave. I just wish I could have been there for myself for that. So what I can remember from that day is I think he reached out via text and we started talking. He was being flirty and sweet and I was reciprocating. We were talking and he brought up maybe meeting that night at the bar that we used to go to when we were seeing each other, and I agreed. And so we met up at the bar and later that night, and things were going well. We had a couple drinks. We were talking and we were having fun, and so we decided to go back to his house, and we did, and we watched a movie, and then it was time for bed, and that's when we went to sleep. And then I remember waking up just feeling in a daze and waking up to him doing things that I did not consent to. So when I woke up, I think I was frozen for a little bit. I think I was just trying to understand what was going on because I just woke up. I was confused and there were things going on that I had no idea were going on. I put my hand underneath the pillow and he had a bottle of lube that was underneath my pillow. And that's how I know that things were going on that I did not consent to 100% because we had never had to use that before and he would never have had to use that if I was awake. And when I pulled it out and showed him, he looked like a kid that was just like caught doing something they weren't supposed to do. And I was like, what is this? And he goes, and he just threw it off the bed and we went to bed. And I think I was just in shock. I think that I had just woken up a minute or two before. I didn't know what was going on. And so that morning, I think I just was in autopilot until I got back to my house. And then once I got back to my house, I started to really think about what had gone on, and that's when it really sunk in. I think I was talking to my best friend. I was texting her and letting her know like kind of what happened that night and how I was feeling. And I texted him and I was like, hey, like, can we talk a second about kind of what happened last night? Like this is what I remember. And I remember the first thing he said to me was he got upset at me and said, why are you bringing this up now? I'm going to go see my aunt and uncle today, and basically turning it around on me and getting upset with me that I was bringing this up and that I felt this way about the situation. So just immediate anger on his part. At the time, again, I tried to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And so when he was getting angry at me and saying like, oh, I'm going to go see, family today and you're bringing this up, a part of me was like, oh, am I in the wrong? And then I was talking to my best friend on the phone and I just remember it hitting me all at once when I'm telling her what happened and what I remembered. And she said, Carolyn, I think you were raped. And I just remember being against a wall and I just fell to the floor and started crying. And I was just so upset. I remember just being so hurt, and also hurt that his reaction to me when I came to him about this was immediate anger at me. And I just remember kind of being in a daze that day. I lived in the vicinity of the hospital at that time. And I just remember walking to the hospital, and I'm glad I did this. I got a rape kit done that day, but I just remember being on autopilot, I think. I just remember going through the motions, and, I remember the doctor was really kind to me when they were doing the rape kit. He put his hand on my shoulder and was like, I'm so sorry this happened to you, which I appreciated, because I know a lot of women go through this and they're either questioned immediately or not trusted. That moment of care and understanding from the doctor is really special to me, and I really appreciate that. But I just remember that day I was just in a haze. I feel really grateful because I had a few friends at the time that I was talking to and that I could call and that were there for me, and I really appreciate that. What happened next after all this? I think pretty quickly I cut communication off with him. So I went through the rape kit and all of that, and I had my friends to lean on, and I think a couple years went by, a year and a half. And I started seeing my now fiance, and I hadn't heard from this guy in a long time. And I remember one of our first dates, we went to a zoo, and all of a sudden I got a friend request from him where he friend requested me and then deleted it really fast, basically just messing with me, messing with my head. And I remember being in the car and I started to cry. I got really upset and really confused as to like, why are you reaching out to me now? I didn't quite understand. And from then on, for a couple months, he started to do things like that, send me messages or try to add me on Snapchat and then delete it really quickly. And so I ended up going to the police and I ended up saying my statement to a detective at the time. I think I was at a point where I was done being messed with by him. This was a pattern of his where time would go on and then he'd reappear, disappear, and reappear. And I didn't want to deal with that any longer. So I went to the detective and I was fortunate enough to have friends who could commemorate my story. I think I had about 3 or 4 friends who said the same thing I did about what I said about that night. So I was really lucky to have that in my corner. I was just as lucky with my detective as I was with my doctor. He made me feel believed and understood, and he gave me his phone number, and he started the process of building a case against this man. This is somebody who actually also wanted to be a police officer himself. He was in school to become a police officer, and he actually tried to become an officer at the place that my detective worked at. My detective called me to let me know that this was going on, and he also let me know that he was not going to become an officer. He couldn't tell me exactly why. I think in the process, he was not going to be an officer there, but he did tell me that he did not want people like him working there. This was a case that went on for a really long time. It was throughout COVID and up to, I think, last year around this time, he called me and he said, "Carolyn, I'm really sorry. We sent this in and they're not going to take this to court." When I found out that he knew about the case and how angry he was, that did bring up a lot for me. I think I went for a period of time where I was scared for myself and my family. I think there was a span of 8 to 9 months where I just had moments of, does he know where I live? Does he know what kind of car I drive? Just fear for myself and my family. It did end up dying out, I think, just with time. And also I was in a new relationship with my now fiance, who it's the most supportive and safe relationship that I have ever had in my entire life. So I think just being in that, I started to feel safer and just not be in that same headspace that I was in. CPTSD is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and a lot of the time that originates in childhood. PTSD is usually a one-off occurrence, like a car accident. Someone can get PTSD from a car accident, and that can last and have symptoms for a long time as well. CPTSD is ongoing trauma. It's when your day-to-day is traumatic. It's when there are situations going on throughout your life for a certain amount of time that is traumatic. And my childhood caused me to get CPTSD. I remember being a child and just wishing someone would come save us, wishing someone would see what was going on in the house, see the level of dysfunction and stop it or help us get the help that we needed. I remember wanting, because we had very close neighbors, I remember wanting the neighbors to step in and be that person for us and say, hey, something needs to change here. Or one of our family members, one of our extended family members to come in and say, hey, something needs to change. I just remember wanting that for so long. I remember wanting that till even a couple of years ago. I am in therapy currently, which has been amazing. It's been very helpful. It's been very eye-opening. That's where, I was told I have CPTSD and developmental trauma and anxiety stemming from the trauma from childhood. So I did that, and then I kind of did my own reading on CPTSD. I went through a course to become a trauma recovery practitioner. And through that course, it helped me open my eyes to even more kind of what I went through and how it changes the brain and how it affects you after going through things like that. And so that's kind of been my journey to where I am today. As a trauma recovery practitioner, I help my clients with dysregulated nervous systems. I help them understand that what they went through wasn't their fault. We try to heal what they have gone through tools and psychotherapy, things like that can kind of help them go from just being in survival mode to thriving and finding empowerment after trauma, because a lot of times we're stuck after trauma. We don't see a future for ourselves. We're just trying to survive. And so with trauma recovery coaching that I do with my clients, it's a way to help them overcome what they have gone through and just know that their past doesn't define or dictate their future. So I've been public with my story on social media now for, I think around 8 months. And at first, and at times, it's difficult feeling like people from my life are seeing this and they know. But then I remember that there's a lot of people out there that need the help that I can give with my training. And that's more important to me than what people from my past or my life think. So that's why I continue to do what I'm doing.